Gospel according to Luke, the 14th chapter. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. And he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose their places of honor, saying, "When you were invited by some to a wedding feast, do not sit in the place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person.' And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." He said also to the man who had invited him, "When you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and can be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because then cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just." The word of the Lord. You may be seated. Many of us can remember the commercial from the early 90s where Sally Struthers asks the question, "Do you want to make more money?" And then answers before any of us have time to think about that question, because of course we all do. It's not just money though, is it? It's not just about money. Sometimes it could be a promotion. Sometimes it could be an award. There is something that animates us and motivates us. And this is called status. And it's something we all seek out in one way or the other. Adam Smith, famous for his Wealth of Nations, which seems to be recorded time and time again, mentioned time and time again, also wrote other works. And he wrote in another section, to be observed, to be attended to be taken notice of with sympathy, complacency, and approbation are all the advantages which we can propose to derive from it, that is status. He continues, to feel that we are taken no notice of necessarily disappoints the most ardent desires of human nature. The poor man goes out and comes in unheeded. And when in the midst of a crowd is in the same obscurity as if shut up in his own hovel. The man of rank and distinction, on the contrary, is observed by all the world. Everybody is eager to look at him. His actions are the objects of the public care. Scarce a word, scarce a gesture that fall from him will be neglected. Smith is often cited, and we often do cite the Wealth of Nations talking about the free market, but yet here Smith seems to observe there's something deeper that motivates us than just mere money. And we need to examine that. That is the status. We've seen this before. We know that some people will trade money in order to get other kinds of status, or some people will cash in on their celebrity in order to get money. And these things get traded. This is the world we live in. This is the status-seeking world, the very important person world. But Christ in our passage is comparing the perfect world that we imagine with the perfect world that God imagines. In the perfect world that God imagines, the unwell are made well. The unknown are made known. The unseen are seen. So let's look at this second point first. In the ancient world, in many places today, where you sit shows status. When you arrive shows status. One Roman noble retells of an incident about how one of his relatives had planned this major event and did not pick out the seating properly. So when a high potentate comes, the potentate says, "I'm not coming to this party," turns around and leaves. And the Roman writer states, "And my relative brought shame upon the family." This was the world into which Jesus lives. And you know what? It's not very different from today. Of course, we have more open seating today at banquets, but there are other things. Maybe it's the court side or field side seating at a major sporting event. Maybe it's front row at a concert. Maybe it's having your name on a list of very important people. Status still exists in our world, and many people will do anything, and most of us will do quite a lot in order to get status. For even today, we see good Christians or good people abase themselves simply to be next to powerful people. But Christ is saying that God is not interested in how powerful you are or who you rub shoulders with. And that where you sit at the table doesn't mean you can't join Christ at his feast. In fact, Christ will go a step further. You're going to rub shoulders with people when you proclaim the gospel who are going to destroy your prestige and sap your status. We don't want to talk to certain people, share the gospel with certain people, because we're afraid what the good people might say about us Christians. But these are the people that God wants us to go to. These are the people in our lives, not in a way that destroys us personally, but in a way that we should be willing to sacrifice our status in order to proclaim the gospel. So what do you get when you do this? You get to show the gospel, and that the gospel will pursue people no matter how far they are from the centers of power. Yet this is more than restoring status or giving honor to people who are excluded. Christ shows God is the one who knows us because he sees us no matter how invisible we may be. And so this brings us to the ultimate invisibility. At the beginning of chapter 14, and of course last week, we read about Jesus healing these overlooked, unseen, low-status people, coming to them and being rebuked because he dares to defile the status of either the holy day of the Sabbath or defile the status of the good people by going and touching these unclean and needy people. You see, there's nothing God is going to ask of you and me that he hasn't already shown in his Son. And so Jesus here at the outset has healed someone, which starts him off talking. Christ ignores the worthiness of the person he is healing and instead focuses on the restoring power of the gospel. For that is the only status which impresses God, the proclamation of the gospel. We often wish to see healing as an act of worldly status restoration. Yet Christ sees status from the gospel point of view, where we are seen and known and healed and restored to the presence of God. And therefore, Christ's invitation is not for more worldly power, not to rub shoulders with the high and mighty, but rather to make known God's kingdom to a world in desperate need of restoration. So the question might be, do you want to preach the gospel? Sure, we all say we do. All we have to do is look to Christ, see where he goes, see how he acted. It's not hard. He hasn't set these things in stone, not a set of rules that he doesn't have to obey, but we do. No, he has demonstrated these in the power of Jesus Christ. And that same power enlivens and indwells you and me because God has promised to send his Son through the works of word and sacrament, and send his Spirit to all people baptized into his holy church. Amen.